Hi, gabi sa tanan. Good evening to everyone. Welcome back to the CBDO opening night, and this is the Mindanao Forum. And tonight we have very special guests as panelists for tonight. And without further ado, let me introduce them one by one. First up is Ryanne Murcia. Ryan Joseph Murcia, commonly known as Ryan Murcia, was born in the province of Ipil, Zamboangueña, in the southwestern Philippine island of Mindanao in 1991. In 2014, she graduated at the Ateneo de Zamboanga University with a bachelor's degree in mass communication, and in 2018, she became an alumna of the platform Busan of the Busan International Film Festival in South Korea. Her, her first short film, entitled No Ama Conmigo, I hope I got that right, Love Me Not, in 2013, won her the Golden Durian at the first edition of the Salamindanao International Film Festival, now known as Salamindanao Asian Film Festival. In 2014, she made her second short film, Apasol, Chasing Sun, where she also served as an actor and won her first acting award at the Mindanao Film Festival, and went on to compete at Salamindanao International Film Festival and Cinemalaya Philippine Independent Film Festival. Entre medio del fin, in the middle of an end. Her third short film won Best Film, then Best Screenplay at the Mindanao Film Festival in 2016. The film was nominated at Gawad Urian in 2017 and was selected amongst the best Filipino short films showcased abroad. She is part of the panel for the Philippine Talks on Regional Cinema at the Busan International Film Festival in 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Murcia. Palapak
Hi.
naman po tayo. Hello po, good evening.
Good
And
evening. Hi.
yes. Okay. Next up is Director Teng Mangansakan II, and he is a film producer, director, writer, and curator for the arts. His filmography has helped shape the landscape of Mindanao cinema and the regional cinema new wave movement in the Philippines. He edits New Durian Cinema, an online journal of Southeast Asian cinema, and runs the annual Salamindanao Asian Film Festival. Ladies and gentlemen, Direct Teng Mangansakan II. Welcome po,
Hello, good evening.
Direct Teng. Nice to see you
Hello.
again. And of course, moving on, the third guest and a member of the panel for tonight's Mindanao Forum is none other than Direk Teddy Ko, who has been a curator and archivist for more than 30 years, organizing various film programs and retrospectives. He was instrumental in the recovery and repatriation of the lost films of Gerardo de Leon, Manuel Conde, and Nonoy Marcelo, among others. He is a constant member of the selection committees of Cinema One Originals, Quezon City International Film Festival, and Cinemalaya Short Film Section. He co-founded and continues to curate Cinema Rehiyon, the biggest gathering of filmmakers from all around the Philippines. He is the immediate past Commissioner of the Arts of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, or the NCCA, and the former chair of the NCCA's Cinema Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, Direct Teddy Ko.
Yes, good evening to everybody, especially to the people, the filmmakers, the viewers from Mindanao, and of course from all over the Philippines, who are all watching and tuned to this panel discussion. And congratulations to Cine de Oro for staging its first virtual film festival.
Thank you, po. And okay, we also have with us Direct Jojo Sescon. So Jojo, welcome back.
Hi, good evening sa lahat ng nanonood. Sana safe kayo at may bagyo din tayo ngayon na pumasok sa bansa natin. Tsaka timing din ata sa paglabas ng pelikula kung ano sa Sendong na bagyo.
Parang ano kasi siya, sir, no? So, parang coincidental, pero I think it's, ano ba yan? Destiny? Okay. Before we start, before we proceed with the forum, to all the viewers of our Facebook Live, we would like to invite you and like our CVD Auto Film Festival Facebook page, where you get to see all of the films for CVD Auto this year, and especially uh, the Inday films and Bulawanong Bahandi. July, Direct July told me it's Bulawanong Bahandi is golden treasures. No, so even the films from the past who were not curated before in any film festival, those are our treasured films. So yun po. So let's start. Okay na po ba lahat? Direct Teng?
Yes.
Okay. Are we good to go? Ryan and
Yep.
Sir Sadiko? All right.
Let the bitching begin.
Oh! Let's do that. All right. Okay. Let's talk about history. How would you narrate or tell us about the history of Mindanao cinema? Let's start off with Sir Tarico.
Oh yes. Yeah. Okay. There are two things. No, there is a Mindanao cinema, and there is a film. There's a cinema about Mindanao. No, those are two different things. First off, of course, we begin with cinema about Mindanao. No, of course, since the early days of filmmaking, a lot of foreign filmmakers, documentary filmmakers, especially, had been around, no, and they've shot the various scenes of the different parts of the Philippines, no, and of course, including Mindanao. No, we will not go into that because these are all foreign film correspondents who had come here to shoot on assignment. Many of these newsreels, no, and short documentaries, short programs about different aspects of the Philippines. The In fact, the pioneer filmmaker, considered the father of Philippine cinema, Jose Nepomuceno, had also been a correspondent for Pathé in France, and shot also a number of short films about the Philippines. But the history of films about Mindanao goes back a long way, even way back into the silent days, beginning at around 1930, and we've had a long history actually, but it's full of, I think it's spot full of misses and so we say, instead of representation, a lot of it actually has been misrepresentation. But the thing is, because there's been no proper study yet, of all of these films that have been made, mainly because we don't have copies of many of these titles anymore. Although there are still a few extant titles like Zamboangueña, and then the re-edited film Brides of Sulu. So we can find some clues, about how Mindanao was depicted, in Philippine cinema, and how it was represented or either represented or misrepresented. But I think this subject should be a future study for film scholars, especially Mindanaoan filmmakers, because this is your region. Yeah, and one of the earliest films is actually made in 1930. It's called Oriental Blood. In fact, it was produced by a woman, Carmen Concha, and directed by the person who was considered maybe the dean of Philippine filmmakers at that time, Carlos Van der Tolosa. And of course, there's no copy of that film anymore, but we can surmise what it may have looked like from maybe a synopsis that I will read, no, from the Mont Blanco filmography, no. There is a filmography, no, compiled decades ago here by Carmencita Mont Blanco, who was a master's student in library science, and she put together titles of with synopsis and credits of films from 1912 until 1958. No, okay. Filmed in Mindanao, Manila, in Japan. No, this is Oriental Blood, directed by Carlos Van der Tolosa. It even starred Jose Corazon de Jesus, the poet, no, and Atang de la Rama. Here's a brief synopsis. Now, the story of a Moro, a supposed son of a Moro Datu, who is compelled to leave home because of an affair with a Moro girl who is to marry another, and because he is denied the love of his people. He comes to Manila, where he inherits a fortune from his real father. Anyway, this film was made during a time, of course, of when Philippine cinema was still producing a lot of it was still a fantasy factory. No, we did not have films yet that were well, there were some, but not too many documentary films yet, and this is a far cry, from films that are being made today. And then, of course, you had after that you had other films like Moro Pirates, directed by Jose Nepomuceno in 1931, and another film called Princess Tarhata, which of which very very little is known about. But it's supposedly based on the real story of this Tausug princess, Princess Tarhata in the 20s, and she was supposedly the first Moro woman to be sent abroad to study in the United States. And of course, we come to the most well-known and unfortunately extant film, Zamboanga, made in 1937, directed by Eduardo de Castro. I'm sure some of you have already seen it. And it stars Fernando Poe Sr. and Rosa del Rosario, who were box office stars at that time, both from Manila. They were not real Muslims, and they were also Manila filmmakers who came from Manila, from the industry in Manila. But this was authentic in the sense that it had actually been shot in Zamboanga, in Sulu. I don't know what it was called, if it was already, if Zamboanga and Sulu were were linked together at that time. Well, at least the locales were authentic, and so there are some documentary touches in the film, but still it was a fantasy film. It was shall we say a reimagination of Mora land during that time, in the late 30s, by movie makers coming from the mainstream film industry here in Manila. So these are just examples of films about Mindanao. And then when you go to the modern era, of course, you have FPJ, Fernando Poe Jr. making films set in Mindanao, period films, and also contemporary films like Magnum Muslim 357, Ramon Revilla with Camlon, who is a historical figure, and also a film called Juramentado, in which he plays Muslims. And then Marilu Diaz-Abaya made a film called Bagong Bayani, sometime in 2000, and also it also tried to depict the issues that were confronting the Moro region at the time, especially in particular Mindanao. So when you say Mindanao in Philippine cinema, at least coming from the mainstream, it usually centered on the on the more Muslim issues. No, it always depicted the Muslims, never about the Lumas, never about ordinary folk living in Mindanao for some reason, because Mindanao, I think, had always been considered as the other. No, it was still for a long, long time terra incognita. No, not there were no direct flights coming to Mindanao, so I think there was very little no television yet, of course. So Mindanao was still some kind of an exotic other, in the imagination of Filipino filmmakers who are mostly based in Manila, of course. Yeah. I think uh, I will. This is just a brief backgrounder. I do not pretend to be an expert on films about Mindanao. No, I'm just mentioning all of this little information. Some of them may be trivial out of what I've studied and learned, no, in my almost 40 years of watching Filipino movies. Uh, I think I should leave it to Ryan and especially Teng Mangansakan, no, to talk about the contemporary Mindanao cinema. No, so when the
Yes.
contemporary Mindanao cinema, I think we are already talking about uh, films made by Mindanaoan filmmakers, films made by local natives, uh, and not anymore films about the other films made by uh, foreigners or Manileños who have a kind of shall we say even stereotypical imagination of what Mindanao looks like and how their story should be told. You know? Okay, so I think I've spoken enough.
Yes. Thank you,
And
Director
before that,
Eddie.
I would like to mention that our two panelists, my fellow panelists, Jojo Sescon, no, of Korean Arts, and Teng Mangansakan, because I think the two of them were at least had been the pioneers. No, they jump started filmmaking in Mindanao. Unless new evidence comes up, and then we come across other names, other films that have been made previously. But Mindanao filmmaking in Mindanao is a very very young scene, no. But at the same time, it's also it's a vast territory. But at the same time, it is actually I think very very exciting because a lot of things are happening. And at last count, I think I counted 10 regional film festivals in Mindanao. That's a lot, no? Who would have imagined that in the 21st century, Mindanao is already quite well represented in terms of filmmaking.
Yes.
Starting with the pioneers, Jojo Sescon and Teng Mangansakan.
Yes. Thank you, Director Eddie. Direct Tang,
Hmm?
your turn.
Yeah, I think I guess I came into the picture during a time when I think it was the last years of the celluloid era, the late 90s. So I started by doing 16 millimeter films, but again that was a very prohibitive medium. So if you wanted to make a film, then you have to go to Manila because the stocks were only available in Manila. The labs were in Manila, and this type of filmmaking was kind of very expensive. You should have at least mga 50,000 to 100,000 to make a short film, or you get grants from NCCA, from Oil Fund, from Kodak, from PIA, so that um, uh, the big cost of your production is subsidized. So yeah, I think that the good thing about this era was that it was also an era of vast experimentation, because during this era, the likes of Christo Pianetsco and people from Oil Fund were encouraging young people to really try making films, and not just making films the way the mainstream were making films, but it was really a time when it was encouraged to experiment and to be bold and to be what you wanted to be. So as for me, I think it was a good time. And then it was also the time when celluloid was waning. Digital technology was kind of being developed. So it was kind of a transition from 60 millimeter, 35 millimeter celluloid filmmaking, even super 8 mm filmmaking into the first, kumbaga, incarnations of digital technology. So you have these big cameras and big tapes, but it allowed you to make films in a cheap manner compared to celluloid films. That's why madaming filmmakers were able to make films during this time, and it also allowed filmmakers from different parts of the country to make films. And one of those filmmakers happened to be me. In the year 2000, um, a friend of mine, Danton Remoto, loaned me a video camera. So pinahiram na sa akin. Eh tamang-tama umuwi ako ng Mindanao, and during that time, nagkagera yung all-out war ni Erap Estrada, and I was able to shoot and make a documentary. And that's how I started making documentaries for the first decade of my film life, from 2000 to 2009. And also because ang bilis, very rapid in digital technology, other filmmakers from other parts of the Philippines and even in Mindanao started making their films. Ang pinaka kumbaga memorable sa akin after me was the film Kasila by I forgot the name of the director, from Davao, but the film was about the armed conflict in North Cotabato. So yun yung nangyari, and everybody followed na. 2007, for instance, was a breakthrough year for Mindanao cinema because it was the year when the first full-length film was produced. Actually, when I was doing the research, ano ba yung naunang full-length film from Mindanao? Was it a documentary or was it a full-length feature film? And it so happened that the competition for the title was between Ajani Arumpak and Herwalay and Huling Balian of Sherad Sanchez. But chronologically, unang lumabas syempre yung walay ni Ajani Arumpak. So we could say that the first full-length feature of Mindanao cinema happened to be a documentary by Ajani Arumpak. And the first feature film, feature fictional dramatic narrative happened to be the Huling Balian of Sherad Anthony Sanchez from Davao in 2007. So ito yung mga initial na lumabas. And then of course, in the course of my research, the name of Jojo Sescon popped out, and I was able to verify this with Teddy and Mobile Fund and all the other institutions, even Philip Chea. So ganun yung simula ng Mindanao cinema. And I think it was at first, I don't know with Jojo, at first it was a very lonely thing because alam mo parang ikaw lang yung gumagawa ng pelikula sa Mindanao, wala kang kasama, wala kang tropa. So parang alam mo yung parang hirap-hirap nung ganun. And eventually we were able to create this big community of filmmakers and film lovers through film festivals, through workshops, and I guess even me, when we talk about my collaborators in my films, they were actually products of my workshops, of my seminars, and even yung engagement ko, for example, with Cinema Rehiyon and etc. So Jojo, I think would share some more.
Ang alam ko, in the mid-80s, there was this Colombian priest. His name is Neil Freezer. And he put up this it's like a documentary photography, photo documentation and video based in Uzamis. And I think they were able to produce good enough documentaries, focus more on people's struggle during the time of Marcos. So I could not lost track of those guys. at saka hindi ko maalala din yung cannot remember those films that they produce. But that's I think that's the only thing that I can remember. And they're ahead of me.
Okay. Thank you, Direct Jojo. How about Ryan?
So, well, in my part of history, it's very recent, quite recent. As far as I remember, before I came into filmmaking, the filmmakers that I know are from Zamboanga, Sharon Diok and Zurich Chan. And actually, they became my friends, and I also became a filmmaker. And I think as I was in film since 2011, uh, my first film festival was Cinema Rehiyon. Uh, and my film was programmed by Teng Mangansakan, who was the Mindanao representative uh, uh, at the NCCA Cinema Committee that time. So my first experience with film festival and the convergence of filmmakers in Mindanao and the rest of the Philippines is actually Cinema Rehiyon. That's when I met Mindanaoan filmmakers such as Bagani Fiola, used to have a different hair then. I met Teng Mangansakan, and I was so scared before. And I met Sir Teddy ko. I was so young then, Sir Teddy. And I met a lot of filmmakers. And through Cinema Rehiyon, almost every year I've been to Cinema Rehiyon. I think I developed relationships with the different filmmakers in Mindanao, which inspire me so much. Joe Bacos, for example, uh, make extraordinary film from short films. We actually competed also in our films competed in Salamindanao International Film Festival then, and with our short films. And I don't know. I mean, the history that I know about Mindanao cinema, in my part, is the new generations which are actually growing. They a lot of filmmakers, from what Teng said, where at the time when they were making films. I mean, they are making films. They're starting. It's so expensive. You have to go to Manila to actually make your films, get your film stocks, and actually develop them. But now, because of the digital technology, I think the Mindanao cinema has grown exponentially. We see films in the Caraga region. I think the youngest of the film communities that are developed, the Caraga, Nabunturan, for example, and as young as 15 years old, they're already making films here in Mindanao. And then I think that's very beautiful because we get to see how this generation think. This generation, I'm not part of this generation, I think. I think the generations now tell a different kind of story. The stories that focuses on self. And I think that's also beautiful because we used to seeing Mindanao stories about the peace and conflict. And Mindanao is not only about that. Mindanao is also about self. It's also about the different cultures that we celebrate here. It's not only the Muslims. We also have films about the Lumads, which R.B. Barberon, a champion from the Mindanao. We also have stories about myths and the different kinds of the different tastes of Mindanao by Joe Bacos of CDO. Different take on mythology by Bagani Fiola in Davao. A different Mindanao experience coming from Zamboanga by Zuri Chan. Uh, of course, the peace and conflict stories we have in Mindanao is also part of us as Mindanaoan because we we experience siege, we experience that as well. But I think the younger generation now have a different take on that. Uh, for example, Edmund Telmo will have a different take on life in Mindanao. So I think that's my part of the history of Mindanao.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay. So direct take.
I think sa tingin ko ha if you were to evaluate and assess and historicize Mindanao cinema, it's valuable to also give credit to the left because I believe that the left, especially in the 80s,
Yeah.
it was responsible for a lot of the films that were made, documentaries mostly, but a lot of them sadly are no longer available. I remember when I was in college in Ateneo de Davao, I used to visit the office of Bayan, uh, uh, which was very close to Ateneo, and there was a cabinet there containing a lot of documentaries shot uh, around Mindanao, shot by Mindanaoan documentarians. So ayun, sayang din na I think it's really important that we archive our materials so that we can really study Santay Galing, and because it's also the story of Mindanao. Basically, we are all chronicles of the story of Mindanao. So importante 'yon sa tingin ko.
Did you get the names of the cameraman or the filmmaker thing?
I'll check kasi I think nasa gamit ko yun when I was in college. I scribbled down my notes. Kung ma-retrieve ko yung mga gamit, I think importante yun. And I'm also studying I'm also trying to research on a lot of parang kasi may mga leads. For instance, there's this story that in Davao del Sur, merong nag-shoot dati ng mga action film using Beta Max in the 80s. And if you are to, 'di ba, reimagine Scalawags kasi 'di ba may mga scenes sa Scalawags yung nagbabaril-barilan kunwari. These are reminiscent of those films na sinut sa Davao del Sur, because ang sabi sa akin, the Davao del Sur action films were actually copies of uh, blockbuster films. There were copies of FPJ, there were copies of Ramon Revilla, and all the big action stars of that era. So even that, I think, would be important siya na pag-aralan in terms of how, di ba, yung the creation of icons, yung iconography also trickles down to Mindanao. So yun, I hope mahanap pa natin yung mga ganung klaseng bagay, and I hope that may available pa na transfer from beta to digital. So ayun.
Yes. Thank you, Direct Teng. Okay. That is history, and from what we have heard, grabe, deeply rooted pala ang Mindanao in terms of films. Like films about Mindanao and films by Mindanao. So, yun. But moving on, we move now to the present. What is the current state of Mindanao cinema? Unsay estado sa ato ang cinema dinhi sa Mindanao?
Teddy volunteered. Sige, sunod ako.
Yes, Direct Teddy.
Before
Yes.
we move on to the present, no, I just
Okay.
want to mention historical detail, which is, I think, maybe especially Teng should know, because you're also doing research, no, on the history of Mindanao cinema. During the heyday of the Visayan movie industry, no, which was mostly based in Cebu City, there were 5 film companies that were headquartered here in Davao.
Yeah. Mm.
No, there were also a few, maybe 2 or 3 in Dumaguete, no, but they were all producing Visayan language films. No, the problem is, of course, as usual, archiving again. No, we don't have any copies of this film. Much less we don't even have details. No, we don't have filmographies of these titles. Mainly, it's all anecdotal, and also maybe the book written by Paul Grant and Misha Anisimov, no, Lila's The History of the Design Movie Industry. You can find some information there. No? So I would like to say that there had been film companies already in Davao in the 1950s and 60s. No? And what kind of film they had produced, we do not know. We have no idea. So there has to be further digging into this. So let's now move to the present.
Kasi there was also kasi the Loy theory is either they were producing films from Davao or they were like a distribution company of Cebuano films to Mindanao. So these are two things we need to clarify. Ang alam ko yung there's an area in Davao, the Uyangoren area, andun yung mga movie studios na yon. So yun yung mga dinidig up pa namin na kung ngayon na mga bagay, and we don't know kung may mahanap pa tayo.
Yeah, that's why I think it's important for the Mindanaoan critics and scholars, no, and researchers to do their own history, no, to do their own research into all of these things, because we cannot possibly try to do it from here in Manila unless we travel there.
Yeah, if we have friends na mga historians, no, maybe we can ask them to maybe perhaps include. No, I know of one. He's a friend of mine, and he's from Cagayan de Oro, and he's really a historian. So, basin, no, pwede. Okay, now let's move on to what is the current state unsa atong ang estado sa Mindanao cinema karon, no, or what is the current state of Mindanao cinema? Any volunteers?
I think the current state of I think the current state of Mindanao cinema is quite exciting, as how I see it, because there's a lot of filmmakers from Mindanao now making films as young as 15 years old, and I think also they bring a different take on the experience of Mindanao. I think that's very important. That's also one of the most beautiful things that's happening right now, because a lot of people in other parts of the Philippines and also internationally, they see Mindanao in a very they see Mindanao sometimes only because of the peace and conflict issues, but I don't think that's the case, and that's why I'm very excited and I'm very hopeful for the current generations making films, because they give you a different taste of Mindanao. They give you exciting parts of Mindanao, like different expressions, experimental. They also make films about, I don't know, the devils. I mean, what I'm saying is that these are more creative take on the experience of Mindanao, and we have so much to share with our culture. For example, imagine we are very multicultural. For example, in Zamboanga alone, and it's only a small part of Mindanao, we're very multicultural. We have at least four tribes of Muslims. There are 13 that I know of, but we cater to four tribes of Muslims. We have Lumads, we have Sabanons, we have Chavacanos, which are also different world, for example, because the Chavacanos have a different trait. It's very Hispanic also. We have Chinese in and Bisaya in Zamboanga, for example. These mixture of different cultures and expressions, for example, it gives a different feel or a different story. For example, for Zamboanga, what more if you are talking about the whole stories of Mindanao? I think the stories from the Caraga also is very important. They're very political. They show very political films. In Davao, there's a lot of things going on. Young filmmakers from Ozamis, and now currently the Cine de Oro caters to women filmmakers in Mindanao. And I think that's also very exciting because I realized when I was curating for Cinema Rehiyon and recently I realized that I think we only have July, I think the festival director of Cine de Oro, as a woman filmmaker who made a full-length film. Well, of course, aside from Jaja Arumpak, which is a Mindanaoan, but she's now based in in Manila. What I mean is, Mindanaoans that live in Mindanao and make films in Mindanao. The rise of women filmmakers in Mindanao, I think that's very exciting, and films to watch out. Yeah, the films from Mindanao now. I think is very exciting because it makes you experience Mindanao in a different level. But of course, we also have the likes of Teng Mangansakan who create beautiful films about the Magindanaoan experience, about the Soxargen experience, about the Davao experience, and so on and so forth. So I think it's very exciting. The Mindanao cinema scene right now is very exciting and blue.
Ako, I'll say something on the contrary. Or maybe I'll challenge what Ryan has been saying. Kasi ako, for me, yes, it's part of the trajectory of Mindan. It's part of the trajectory of people of everywhere in the world, that technology dictates what we are now or what we can do. And I think we owe it a lot to digital technology that we're able to make all these films. That's why for me it's no longer something of a surprise that a lot of young people are doing films. Kasi 'di ba, if you have a camera, either a DSLR or a phone camera, if you have a pirated software to edit, you can make a film. You can join MFF, you can join Salamindanao, you can join all these festivals. But again, kasi 'di ba, nakakailang dekada na tayo, and we're really and we've also accomplished a lot of things. For in the last decade, a lot of the Mindanaoan films have made it nationally or internationally. But ang caveat nito is that in the last year or two, the climate and the environment and the opportunities for us to make full-length films, for example, have been diminished or have kumbaga nag-decline. So it's really hard for us now to secure funding to make films. Ang Q Cinema, for instance, dati 7, ngayon 3 na lang. Ang Cinemalaya andyan on di ba? And then you have Cinema 1 na nasa ABS-CBN, so medyo problematic pa rin. And yet, kahit bilangin natin lahat ng grant-giving bodies na to, there's only a small portion that is given to regional cinema. And Mindanao filmmakers are just a small part of that big regional cinema community. So kasi pag titingnan mo in the last 2 years, for instance, ilan lang ba yung Mindanao full-length films? Of course, RB was able to secure funding for his films last year, yung Kaaway sa Sulod or Enemy Within, plus this year yung Highest Peak niya. Other than that, wala na. That's why, for me, if in order for us to really make sure that Mindanao cinema stays as it is or it grows, is that Mindanao filmmakers should also know where to get funding for their films. That's why a lot of Mindanao filmmakers should hone their skills in, collaboration, international collaboration. Kasi ang pera ngayon hindi na sa loob, nasa labas na. Especially with the films na yung ginagawa nating pelikula na hindi naman commercial, for instance. So the big funding is either Europe or now, salamat na lang sa Diyos, meron ng Asia. There's Turin, and now we have the ASEAN co-production, and of course, Singapore has opened itself to co-productions. So ito yung kailangan nating aralin because sa totoo lang, nasanay ang mga Mindanao filmmakers na, sige, kahit may 100,000 tayo, shoot lang tayo. But yung 100,000 na yun can only do so much. And there's a big demand now for how we make films. Hindi na pwedeng DSLR lang yung camera. For instance, you cannot join Netflix if your camera is not within this, diba, a selection of cameras. And for instance, if you want to have an international co-production, the least you can use, for instance, for editing is a DaVinci software. Hindi ka pwedeng gumamit ng other software, otherwise you are going to be treated as an amateur. So ito yung kinakailangan ngayon ng Mindanao filmmakers na umangat. It's for me, it's not enough now that we have stories to tell, that we have this wealth and caves and rivers of stories to tell. It's matching now these stories with the right technology, with the right attitude, with the right things, or otherwise mapag-iwanan tayo ng panahon. That's why, for instance, I think it's important din, alam ni Ryan to, na like for instance, si Zurich, for instance, is na part of CIFIC, and CIFIC finds collaboration between countries and between companies. Importante na ganun tayo tumingin kaysa yung tumingin tayo lang sa ano yung pwede. Otherwise, aside from technology na sasabi kong camera, there's also technology of online. Yun yung YouTube. Otherwise, magpo-produce ng a lot of materials na mag-flood sa atin, na nothing is going to stand out. So importante for me that Mindanao cinema should improve its competitiveness or maintain its competitiveness. Otherwise, mawawala tayo sa passing.
Yes, I agree with that. That's why it's very beautiful right now that there is the Southern Voices Laboratory. It's organized by the Film Development Council of the Philippines, and they teach. I'm part of it. They teach filmmakers about international co-production, so on and so forth. And I think that's Zurich is also part of it. Giles Serencio. I think from CDO we have Julian and Joe Bacchus. And Joe Bacchus recently went to Korea to pitch his film, and now Julian will be undergoing the Rotterdam lab. And I think that's very exciting.
I agree kay Teng na mabilis ang through technology and everything like that. But there's something also worrying of so many filmmakers that coming out, so many festivals, and then producing a lot of basura.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I agree with you, Jojo.
And something like there should be some hopefully like me, gusto ko mag-join na tulungan ang especially the rest na ko dito as yung Cinema de Oro, to raise also the standard of the festival, the quality of films that are para tataas naman ang na hindi lang it's about producing, it's all about kasi for me it's more on the aesthetics of the film. Hindi lang So din masaya dahil kasi may narinig ako din noon sa na isang filmmaker, young filmmaker doon sa doon Ted nung nakita tayo last time sa Manila, na sabi niya masaya ang trend ngayon ng filmmaking kasi maraming filmmakers na lumabas. So marami manonood na sa pelikula natin kasi tayo lang naman nanonood. So talagang pero it's worrying din, no? Kung hindi natin tayo nandito na on guard to make the standard of our festivals na
Agree.
Agree.
Diba? Yeah. Kasi nga yun ang problema, parang may mga tao na or may mga nagsa-study ng cinema, 'di ba? Yung the growth of cinema that really somehow puts emphasis on the quantity of the produce. Parang okay, Mindanao filmmakers have produced XX numbers of film for the 2020, or therefore kung ano sila, alam mo yun, they are robust, they are this and that. But again, kung papanoorin mo yung XX number of films, ilan lang doon ang magsa-stand, di ba? Yun din yung for me, yun din yung caveat ng technology that yung mga bata, and I think it also boils down to how we teach students, yung mga feature filmmakers, na parang parang filmmaking is really, parang it's like an English class na kung alam mo yung subject verb agreement, makapagsulat ka ng sentence, but it doesn't mean that you can be a writer. Diba? Because the knowledge of grammar, the knowledge of diba, tenses and subject verb agreement will only give you a grasp of the language, but it does not give you the mastery of the language to be called diba, something. So parang ganun din. Ang feeling ko na hindi porke nakapasa ka sa English 1, 2, 3, and 4, mas tatawag mong film writer ka na. The same with filmmaking, na hindi porke alam mo yung 'di ba? Alam mo yung sequence 1, 2, and 3, alam mo paano kinakat, 'di ba? Yun na yun kasi yun nga, parang ang issue pa rin dito is how to make your films important, how to make your films matter, and how to make your films last. If even now, kung i-assess natin, kung isipin natin, ano ba yung mga Mindanao films na until now naaalala pa natin? Maybe think of them based on their qualities. Kasi yun yung magmamarka sa isip natin eh. Otherwise, it's just again a deluge of materials na malulunod tayo. And I don't think that's how we should approach or think of the progress of Mindanao cinema. It's really us working together and really us honing our skills and crafts. Yun din for me, yun din for instance ang challenge for film festivals, kasi nabanggit tadi kanina na ang dami-daming film festivals sa Mindanao. Yes, it's a good thing. But also these festivals should be kind of helping filmmakers, as 'di ba, to create the standards. Hindi yung nasabit na 100 films sa isang film festival, yung 100 films na yun ang i-curate ito program. Anong klaseng festival yun? There should be a matter of selection
Isa pa
to
Teng,
know which one should be there.
Cory,
Di ba?
dahil accessible masyado yung mga ang daming yung sa internet. There's a lot of young filmmakers, kasi minsan parang evaluate o ng mga films sa isang school and then all of the films are ang galing nila sa kasi mga bata sa technology and creative, but ang materials nila are taken from movies, from pati music, and they never acknowledge credit and source of
Yeah.
So importante ito na especially for documentary filmmakers. And even hindi fiction o basta ang importante kasi dapat meron tayong moral na o honor na pangangalagaan, especially kung gusto nating makilala tayo as Mindanao filmmakers. So dapat meron tayo talagang pagka diyan banda na on guard tayo, especially na hindi tayo padala-dala na may excited tayo na maraming tingnan natin pero sa bagay process din to na din to mayroon ding lalabas, diba?
Yeah. I think kasi I think talaga kasi 'di ba, kahit na sabihin pa natin na maraming filmmakers na magagaling, it's also a matter of them not really relying on na-accomplish sila ngayon. it's also a matter of challenging themselves. Ano yung pwede ko pang gawin? Yung ganun. So, yun din yun. Na kailangan natin i-hone sa mga filmmakers ng Mindanao. Hindi pwedeng yun at yun na lang parati.
And I think
Ryan.
Okay. Ryan.
ang pinaka-challenge ngayon is because I still don't think that filmmaking is an industry in Mindanao. I mean, filmmakers are in Mindanao are still poor, and we don't have much projects. Sometimes we are forced to take projects that pay low. It's not yet a full industry, unlike, of course, in Manila. That's why we also see a diaspora of filmmakers migrating to the capital because hindi magsusurvive yung creative endeavors nila if they stay in Mindanao. But ang mga nagsusurvive lang is yung may mga pera. Like Teng Mangansakan. May pera yung pamilya niya. So, he can survive with that. But some of us, we struggle to survive filmmaking because it's not yet, an industry. We don't treat it as an industry. And I think it's maybe slowly we have become, we are dealing with it. But, as Sir Urian said, it's a process. And I still believe in that process. And also, I agree so much with how we should challenge ourselves as creators, as what Teng said. And I think the labs, for example, like the MSL of the Salamindanao, I think it should continue because it's a wonderful, wonderful lab. It brings international people to teach filmmaking or to talk about filmmaking with the filmmakers. The Sovo Lab brings in international people as well, not only to teach us how to produce film and to deal with international productions and co-productions, but also it's also a step for us to really think beyond Mindanao. I mean, Mindanaoan films, we own it, we craft it, but it is also worth trying to show it to the world. And I think some of us have, some of the filmmakers like Teng Mangansakan, Sharon Dayok, and so on and so forth have made it internationally. But I think we need more filmmakers to do that. And these labs are very important. And I hope we have more and people support that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, that comprised a lot of the succeeding questions, but we can discuss it further. But before we go into that, here's a fun fact. In Cagayan de Oro, there was a film, Sa Imong Lawas o Dugo, that was actually directed and written by Lorenzo M. de la Serna and produced by DXCC's Ruben Canoy.
Yeah. I know that film.
Mm-mm. And Commander Dimas, it's from Mr. Quezon in the early 90s in RMN also. And of course, the first one that was shot, the first full length film that was shot in Cagayan de Oro in the recent times is Marcado from Joe Batos. So those are just fun facts. Yung kay De La Serna naman, it was produced by Ruben Canoy and it was shot in Cebu. Although the filmmaker is from Cagayan de Oro together with Mr. Quizon.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that, Sean. But I'd like to point out, that some of these films, especially like Sa Dulo ng Tris, which was shot in Cagayan de Oro, produced by Ruben Canoy and directed by Cesar Amigo in the 70s. Was the problem with some of these films that have been produced by the mainstream companies is because the aesthetics were still very, very much, shall we say, standard Tagalog.
Yeah.
The Tagalog cinema, no? It's because the production money emanated from Manila. For example, you would have an entire cast is supposed to be set in Mindanao, but why is everybody speaking in Tagalog? No, not in Chabacano, not in Tausog, not in Visaya. So it doesn't reflect the I mean, this film didn't reflect the real culture and language of Mindanao. And of course, a very recent example is, I'm sure
Mindanao.
Mindanao. Okay.
Pero Ted, Mindanao is uh, is a mix nang inopen ang Mindanao or tinatawag ang Mindanao ng land of promise kaya inopen as homestead. So talaga mixtures of different tribes from Luzon. Kaya dito sa Mindanao mayroon kang tawag na mga lugar na New Mexico kasi they're from Mexico, Pampanga, New Iloilo, New Cebu. So iba-ibang So
I think ang pinakamalaking challenge ngayon talaga is that if you assess the produce of Mindanao, tama si Jojo na may diaspora and may all these people settling in, but wala pa talaga Mindanao film na masasabi mong settler yung point of view. Alam mo, it's a settler. Kasi ako, for me, yun ang hinahanap ko. I want to see a film that is a settler film because I don't see any source of embarrassment or shame in making a film that speaks of your settler experience. Kasi even settler filmmakers, for instance, would make lumad films, would make Moro films, di ba? So in the grand scheme of things, pag titingnan natin yung menu ng Mindanao Cinema, wala pa talagang settler filmmaker na gumawa ng settler film. I think ang pinakamalapit would be Teoria by Zurich Chan. But I guess alam mo yun, I don't know what happened to that film. Pero yun yung mga wala sa atin. Ang malaking issue rin kasi dyan, for instance talaga is issue ng capital. If it's something that comes from the film establishment, it's really a film establishment thing. Yun parating sinasabi natin. Kaya gano'ng kasincere yung filmmaker, pag galing sa pera ng film establishment, then there are expectations from the film establishment that kikita ito, that it should follow a certain formula and it should follow a certain mindset of Moro Mindanao, of Lumad Mindanao, and even of settler Mindanao. So yun yung hinahanap pa rin natin until now, diba? Even with a lot of our own sabi natin Mindanao films, kasi diba, for as long as hindi natin na-reconcile yung bagay din, mahirap hanapin.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Zurich is developing a new film. It's called Cangrejos. And I am excited for that.
Ako rin. Sobrang excited ako sa film na yun.
Who is this? Who is developing a new film?
Zurich Chan. Zurich Chan.
Diba? I think Zurich Chan is siya yung pinaka-promising na filmmaker from Mindanao na kailangan talaga bigyan ng voice. For some strange reasons, even ako, every year yata sa mga New Year's resolution ko, sinasabi ko na I want to see a Zurich Chan film this year. Because for me, very unique yung sensibility niya, and I think I really don't care if you're an abashedly Chavacano, if you're an abashedly middle class or upper class. Importante na lumalabas yung tunay na sensibility mo. It's something that I want filmmakers to really delve into. Diba? Parang ang hirap kasi yung nagkukunwari ka to do this just because. And I also want to condemn kasi ito rin, Teddy, I think ito rin yung nag-i-effect ng Cinema Rehiyon sa Mindanao Cinema. That I think a lot of filmmakers in Mindanao Cinema, kasi I think recently there was a talk. Kami ba, for instance, nung gumagawa kami ng pelikula, was there a consciousness na regional cinema yung ginagawa namin? Or was it just because we just wanted to make a film? kailan pumasok yung consciousness na regional cinema yung ginagawa namin or Mindanao cinema. And I think kung ito important ito sa pag-create ng psychology ng filmmaker. And it's also important in discussing how it affected a lot of the ways Mindanao filmmakers make their films. Kasi di ba parang kung gagawa ng pelikula na itong klaseng bagay at wala akong chances magsisinema riyon, hindi ko gagawin to. I will make a film that is suited to or tailored to a cinema Rehiyon category so that I can do it. I can be created to a cinema Rehiyon. So it's a good or a bad thing. Pero 'di ba malaki yung it's something that we have to talk about, and it's something that we need to explain to young filmmakers na hindi ka makikirate just because you're doing something exotic, but it's because you're doing something that really speaks volumes about your own experience in your own community. Kasi nung, di ba, I've been a curator for a lot of years ng Mindanao ng Cinema Rehiyon, and now with Salamindanao recommending films for Cinema Rehiyon and other festivals, may ganung parating sinasabi mga bata na kailangan gitong klaseng pelikulang gawin nila para lang pumasok sa Cinema Rehiyon.
Okay, Teng, I'd like to reply to that now. You raise a very important point. I've been hearing about this thing for some time already, no? It is true that Cinema Rehiyon selects films, but Cinema Rehiyon has never actually imposed that your film should be like this, like that, no? Because the choices, if you know the history of Cinema Rehiyon, the selections are mostly, the short films, for example, are mostly coming from the regional film festivals. No, for example, I remember with Cinemagis, we would select, for example, the films that won the top 3 prizes. No, and then minsan may pakiusap pa, no? So sabi ni Hobart, baka pwede natin isali ito, gano'n. See, so such decisions are not really being imposed by the cinema committee, in Manila, but they are mostly they are suggestions coming from the regional festival curators and directors, but also because we also made a rule. We formulated a rule a long time ago that the top prize-winning films from each festival are the ones that will be selected for Cinema Rehiyon. So, in fact, I think it is a misnomer to think that it is Cinema Rehiyon that is selecting the short films. Now, for the full-length films, that's another matter, because practically every year I'm the one who suggests the full-length films to be shown because they're not that many, And the simple fact is that many of these full-length films had not been seen yet by the regional film curators because they had only been shown in Manila, because they were made from grants from Cinemalaya, Cinema One, Q Cinema, and they had not yet run the festival circuits in the regions. So I'd like to put that on record, that it is not the cinema committee, because I think there may have been one or two disgruntled individuals who mentioned this, but that is not true. The choices, particularly the short films, are coming from the regional festival directors based on what their top 3 or 4 films are. And that's the basis for inviting the films and the filmmakers. Now, there are some offbeat choices that come from left field and all that. Okay, we can own up to, the cinema committee can own up to that. At least the cinema committee when I was there. Because not everyone in the cinema committee really gives a shit about Cinema Rehiyon. I'll be honest about that.
Yeah, that's an entirely different story. Thank you for that, Sir Tedico and Direct Teng and Ryan and Sir Jojo. Thank you na ako pero di pa tayo tapos. Before we proceed to some of the questions, actually you answered some of the questions prepared by just simply discussing. There's a comment from our live feed. I'll just read it to you and perhaps you could react somehow. Last year, Brillante Mendoza's Mindanao film failed to narrate the root cause of the long-been conflict in the island. He seemingly used a single narrative of a mother, but here comes the burden of excluding the diversities of the tri people, Christians, Lumans, and Muslims. How far did Mindanaoan filmmakers, excluding the outsider, hindi ko alam kung sino pinutukoy, represent the narratives of the tri people?
Let me answer that. You know, I've been a vocal critic of Mindanao, primarily because it was shot in Maguindanao. It was the milieu was in Maguindanao, the milieu was Mindanao. So I was kind of parang masasabi kong I know what it was talking about, and I know how problematic the film was about. Uh, pero yun na nga, parang babalikan ko yung sinabi ko kanina that ang problema rin kasi dito is yung parang even the concept of tribe people is a problematic premise na, di ba? Parang hindi to usapin ng tribe people kasi if you say tribe people, it's Lumad, Christians, settlers, and Moros, and you discount the fact that, for instance, there are Chinese settlers, there are mga Bombay na settlers, there are even Christian settlers in Mindanao, especially in northern part of Mindanao, before all these problems happen. So where would you situate these people? So for me, medyo hindi ako comfortable doon sa tribe people. But babalikan ko rin sinabi ko kanina that it's high time for filmmakers from Mindanao to talk about subjects that they have to talk about. Me, as a Moro filmmaker, as a Maguindanao filmmaker, I have been consistent in my tackling of the Moro struggle and the Moro experience, the Maguindanao experience. Yun sana rin yung hinihingi ko sa aking mga counterparts na sana maging consistent din sila sa pagtackle ng other topics. Like, di ba, yung, alam mong settler ka, settler sensibility mo, gagawa ka ng Moro film or gagawa ka ng Lumad film. Hinahanap ko ngayon talaga yung yung settler film. Saan yung settler film? 'Di ba? All this for the past 20 years walang gumagawang settler film, of course, except Zurich Chan. Hindi ito usapin lang ng merong tao from labas na gumagawa ng pelikula sa Mindanao. Kung ito parang kasalanan din ito ng mga Mindanao filmmakers because they would want to, parang sabi pa nga yung isang intellectual, si Carlo David, na parang the settlers, parang meron sila insecurity sa katawan na they feel that hindi ganun ka-colorful yung buhay nila, and they would rather talk about the Lumads and the Moros and not about themselves. Ako, sa totoo lang, gustong-gusto ko marinig yung settler experience. So, dapat yung mga settler filmmakers should be comfortable in talking about their settler stories. Di ba? Tama yung papapanggap. Di ba? Even for instance, yung mga non-Mindanaoan filmmakers who made Mindanao their home for the last 10 to 20 years, talk about that point of view. Huwag ka magkunwaring gumawa ka ng pelikula sa Bukidnon and bigla ka naging Lumad. Kasi hindi yun yung hinahanap ng Mindanao. Hinahanap natin yung boses na nanggagaling sa iyo. Di ba?
I have a take on that too, because it's also a huge burden if we, as Mindanaoan filmmakers, put the tri-people of Mindanao in one film. I don't think the Mindanaoan experience can be capsulated in one film. And I think I agree with Teng Mangansakan when he said that about the settler film. I agree with that, because whatever you experience in Mindanao, whether or not you're a Muslim or you're the tribe people, I mean, your experience, I think, is enough to tell your story about Mindanao. I mean, maybe my experience is enough. I'm sure my experience is enough. What I'm trying to say is that we also don't put the burden to filmmakers, Mindanaoan filmmakers, to discuss the lives of the tribe people of Mindanao, where they only experience a partial of it. I mean, that's not true anymore. I mean, we tell stories our truth, basically, as filmmakers, and how we experience Mindanao is only part of the Mindanaoan experience. We are located in different parts of Mindanao, and that experience differ. My experience here in Naples, for example, is different from how I live in Zamboanga City, how people live in, Ozamis, Pagadian, CDO, so on and so forth. I mean, when I go to Maguindanao, for example, or Cotabato, when we were shooting the film of Teng, it's also a different Mindanao that I see. You know what I mean? You see a different face of Mindanao every time and each time, and I think that part of Mindanao is very interesting to see in a film. So burdening filmmakers to show you the tribe of Mindanao is quite it's quite for me it's a huge burden. I'm
I think
as a Mindanaoan person, I think seeing a part of Mindanao through a Mindanaoan experience from different filmmakers, I think is a huge part in understanding the Mindanaoan experience.
I think ang burden of showing what is Mindanao, it's nasa documentary yun. Pero sa fiction, I don't think even if they distort whatever, it's because it's a fiction. So eh, the only thing of value of those kind of films are the aesthetic value of the film. So the cinematic value of the film. But that burden about what is really Mindanao, on the culture and everything, lies on documentary kind of filmmaking, not on the fiction films.
But I think there's mimetic quality to fiction films. Ibig sabihin, if you write your script, if you write something fictional, it also mirrors a semblance of reality. And ako sasabihin ko na while watching a lot of Mindanao films and even watching a lot of Mindanao films about the Moros, parang ang daming disconnect na alam ko hindi totoo yon. Hindi ganun yung kultura ng Mindanao, hindi ganun yung
Siguro,
kultura. So, 'di ba? So I think yun yung problema na alam mo yun, parang
kasi kung fiction naman, that's the freedom of the aesthetic freedom of the artist. So
pero ako kasi Jojo, I also want to delineate between what is fictional and what is fallacious. Diba? Fallacy and fiction are two different things. But a lot of Mindanao filmmakers, not Mindanao filmmakers, gumagawa ng fallacy. Like for instance, diba? Okay, fallacious yung pag namatay yung isang Muslim, iaanod mo sa dagat o iaanod mo sa river. Kaya saan ka nakahanap, di ba? You only do that for its cinematic value. It is no longer fictional. It is fallacious. And I've seen a lot of Mindanao filmmakers who
I can really understand that.
Alam mo, may mga ganun.
I can really understand that kasi
diba?
Napaka-sensitive din yan na bagay, no? Lalo na kung you belong on that tribe, no? So wala naman sa katotohanan yan, pero maanuhan man whatever sa akin i-put aside ko lang yun kung ayaw kong panoorin yun because entitled kasi talaga siya. For me, entitled talaga siya as an artist. Mayroon siyang artistic freedom to do whatever he wants to do. Kasi sa akin naman, ang artist kasi, it's not defined by his moral value.
Gusto ko yung sinabi mo, Jojo, kanina. May gusto ko sinabi mo na, yung aesthetics of doing things. Importante rin yun sa paggawa ng Mindanao. Kasi there's also this expectation, and I'm also a victim of this expectation na pag Mindanao films mo kailangan matapang, kailangan it should directly talk about about the Moro struggle or the armed conflict. Na there, di ba, there are ways to talk about the armed struggle, the conflict, in a subtle way using your own aesthetic sensibility. 'Di ba? So bakit ayoko yung pinakaayoko yung bakit si Teng kasi hindi yan siya yung pelikula niya hindi masyadong matapang, hindi naman Mindanao yan kasi 'di ba parang hindi naman niya tinatumbok yung gera-gera. 'Di ba parang I cannot see myself making gera-gera films but the universe that my characters operate are informed by this gera. So yun yung mga actually totoong problema yan Jojo and I think alam din ni Ryan na parang kailangan may gera parang hindi ba pwedeng gumawa ng pelikula about the conflict o walang gera?
All right.
Part of the Mindanaoan experience, but I think there's a huge different parts of Mindanaoan experience. Like I'm always excited to see the films of hindi ko na napangalan, but anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Sir Teddy, you're...
Yes. Yeah, I agree with Teng, no? Really, this Mindanao, when you say Mindanao and Mindanao cinema and films about Mindanao, there's really, as in many other subject matter, there's always some kind of cliche and stereotype, no? And it's often, at least in the perception of many moviegoers, it's because I think they're also shaped by what they see in the media and in the movies, no, and on television especially, that this is a war zone. It's mostly Muslims, which is of course not true because there are settlers, there are Christians, there are Chinese, there are Japanese in Davao, for example. So this is the nice thing, about what is happening in Mindanao cinema and also in other parts of the regions, in Visayas, and some parts of Luzon is we are now entering a new era of filmmaking, and I also think that there are too many festivals. Yes, there are too many filmmakers, as also here in Manila, Everybody wants to make a film. Every student now, filmmaking is cool. I want to make a film.
Everybody is direct.
Yes. Not everybody can direct, but okay, make your film, but show it, throw it to the festivals, enter it here, there, everywhere. But this is now where I think another skill comes in that is very, very crucial, which is the role of curation. Every festival I think must be well curated. It cannot just be, okay, we'll accept everything, we'll show everything. That's what Gawad CCP used to do. Except this year they started curating. They would show everything. They would show 100 films, and then you go there and see, ito palang gusto ng Gawad. See, I think maybe this kind of stereotyping. To a certain extent, maybe it happened in Cinema Rehiyon, but I'm telling you, the choices come mainly from the festival directors and their own taste and choices. But having said that, it's like in Mao's China, let 100 flowers bloom. This is what is happening, but also please also try to select and pick the best looking flowers. Because sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes it's just like, okay, let's just this is a free market. And everybody joins, so everybody expects that their film should be seen. Let's show everything. This is where I think the problem starts because there is no proper curation and filtering of the good from the bad.
All right. Thank you, Sir Teddy. Mostly we tackled all of the questions prepared, and I like this kasi hindi na ako kailangan magsalita madalas because all of you are talking to each other fluidly, and that is a good thing. And listening to such great minds coming together is like, hindi mo like nawawala yung antok. But speaking of antok, I think there are these kids, yung sumasali ng mga film competitions, especially high school and college students. They have classes that have film festivals or pinapasali sa regional festivals talaga. And then some of them, yes, they make films for their classes, but some of them are really good. And turns out, hanggang dun lang. What could be the possible, uh, so we say, problem na lang? Kung bakit sila ganun? They make a film, it was really good, and then they stop.
Hmm. Okay. Let me answer that. I think isa sa mga reasons is that a lot of filmmakers who make films or a lot of students who make films, ang tina-target lang yung competition na yung focus nila. For instance, I want to make a film for the Popcom Film Festival. So nasa Popcom lang. So Popcom Division, Popcom Regional, Popcom National, afterwards wala na. Ganun din sa sa regional festivals, gagawa ng pelikula for Salamindanao, gagawa ng pelikula for MFF, hoping that they would get in sa Cinema Rion. And after Cinema Rion, they won't, tapos na, parang feeling na tapos na yung life ng pelikula nila. And usually, I tell my students, and I tell everybody that there's life after Cinema Rion, there's life after Salamindanao. It's really, ayokong sabihin kasalanan nila. Kasi baka kasalanan din natin na mga enablers ng ganitong klaseng mga bagay not to tell them that, hey, yung pelikula mo ay tungkol sa women. There's this Women Film Festival na baka pwede mong salihan. So, it's a matter of introducing them to new opportunities, exposing them to new opportunities. Ganun parang kailangan may ganun. Ako, for instance, in my capacity as a film curator and as a film festival director, lahat ng pelikula na nasabit sa akin, if I feel that pwede silang mabuhay sa ibang bagay na hindi connected sa akin, hindi connected sa festival, I would see that connection. Okay, yung pelikula mo kasi tungkol sa mga bata. There's this children film festival that I think you should join. So I will, yung ganun. So sana ako rin, kasi sana ang hope ko rin sana sa mga film festival directors, film festival organizers sa Mindanao, is that hindi nila iniisip na ginagawa ko na itong festival na to for myself, for this organization. Because for me, kung gusto mo talagang i-develop yung Mindanao cinema, kailangan din tinutulungan ng mga bata na after naisa lang sa festival mo, saan pa yung pwedeng puntahan. Because not all these kids may initiative na mag-research. Di ba? Not all these kids know that there's Cinemalaya and everything, for instance. So kailangan mong, alam mo yung tulungan. And I would say, tell you this, early this year, there's this festival called the Moro Short Film Festival. And yung mga filmmakers na jumoin doon, parang feeling na that was going to be the be-all and end-all of the journey of their films. And they begrudged some of the filmmakers from their batch who submitted their films to Cinemalaya. And when their films were screened in Cinemalaya, alam mo yung they even campaigned that this film should be disqualified because it was shown elsewhere. And for me, hindi ko nakikitang kailangan nalilimitahan yung lifespan ng isang film. If the filmmaker may initiative na maghanap, thank you. Pag hindi mo naman, kung wala namang ganung klaseng initiative of the filmmakers, tulungan mo. Kasi sayang, especially kung talagang maganda yung pelikula. And yun, alam mo yun, I think ginagawa rin ni Ryan yan. Kasi si Ryan, ang dami-daming films from her festival na ang dami rin napupunta ng festivals because ini-effort niyang ipa-join yun sa other festivals.
That's true.
Okay. Thank you, Director. Ryan?
I came from a place where gumawa ako ng project sa school and then a program siya sa film festival. And because of the encouragement of the people around me, including Teng, Sharon, Zurich, and everyone else, and and they showed me not only Sin Marion actually, but they showed me around with filmmaking. And I think nahawa ako sa passion din nila on films. That's why I continued making films. And when I became a festival director for Festival de Cinepas Mindanao, when I created Festival de Cinepas Mindanao, that's also in my mind and in my heart that I create this film festival not for me, not for anything, but for the filmmakers in this part of Mindanao to be inspired, and not only that, to open their eyes to a lot of possibilities and the beauty of cinema. That's why in our festival we bring in people to talk about cinema, because I feel like the mere sharing of your experience in cinema, mga film talks, this and conversations. I think people who have passion in films uh, and meet new people who wants to be filmmakers, nahahawahan sila eh. That's why I love bringing people to our festival and have them meet the filmmakers of Festival de Cinepas Mindanao, because they get to be inspired and see cinema and learn to love cinema as well. I understand that some students make films and end their life in cinema there. Um, but to those students who want to be more than how they started, I think it's very important to nourish them and to encourage them, and as festivals as well, to help them go somewhere else, because and connect them to people, because they need help just how I needed help before. I needed help from Teng, I needed help from Sharon, from Zurich, and so on and so forth. I needed a lot of help. And I'm not saying I'm accomplished. What I'm saying is that I stayed in cinema because of my passion and love for cinema. And I want to encourage people who have that passion to continue. And mahirap siya, but life lang.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you for that, Ryan.
Ryan,
Okay.
you made so many important points, no, and I completely agree with what you said. That's why also when Teng said many people, especially students, they just submit to a festival and that's it. No, that's the end all and be all. It's as if they had already won a prize and went to Cannes. No, that's why film festivals I think are very crucial. Whatever kind of film festival in what I call talent spotting, no, and then preparing the best filmmakers, no. Let's say a filmmaker who's so talented, but they should try to nurture them. There should be a nurturing process, no. And all these film workshops, all these pitching labs, all these things, they help, no. All these producers and other directors being invited, the sharing of experiences. Uh, for example, just on this panel, Ryan, you started. I remember in Bacolod, that was the first time I met you, and
Yes. First
and
cinema rin ka rin
and,
yun.
and your colleagues, no? I don't know who was there. Adrian.
Adrian.
Oh,
Si
see,
Kevin, yung umiyak, charot.
that was the first time you attended a festival, di ba? I mean,
Yeah.
outside of Zamboanga, and
Yes.
and from there, and then some years later, you got a short film into Cinemalaya, di ba?
Yes.
Oo. Now and then eventually, you move on from your from strength to strength, no? From it's like a step by step process, That's why I think there is a very important role, no, festivals should play, and not just festivals, no, even critics, even curators, even other filmmakers in helping nurture and encourage talent when they see it. No? And I think this will only be good for Philippine cinema, no? Like in the old days, no? I mean, like when Eddie Romero was spotted, he was just 16 years old, and Jerry De Leon discovered him, and then so you look what happened to Eddie Romero, he became big and is now also a national artist and things like that. Same thing. There's some kind of nurturing apprenticeship process, learning process, and I think the filmmakers, the film administrators, the film bureaucrats who've come before, should help in this nurturing process.
Maganda yung pinag-usapan na yan, na topic na yan, Ted, no? I think na ano din ako naantig din ako sa sinabi ni Teng kanina na napaka-lonely yung ko, yung nag-iisa talagang lang, no? Pero that's me. That's the kind of person talaga. Pero nakikita ko rin na lately kasi tinap din ako ng klima, yung ng Oscar Lopez Foundation na nagano sila ng National Film Festival na yung mga young filmmakers naghanap sila ng mga mentors, and I was selected as one for Mindanao, and so ang ko rin ngayon, so napag-usapan natin, I think I have to open myself to everybody who needs advice, mentoring, or so yeah. I think that's the best way na may share for the development of Mindanao filmmakers.
All right. Okay. Before we dig in, I would just like to thank everybody, and we're almost running out of time as scheduled, and our 1 million question goes to two of our panelists for tonight. And before we say our goodbyes, and these are this is for Sir Teng, Direct Teng, and Direct Ryan. Here's a question coming from our Facebook Live. Are we ready to see films or documentaries tackling about LGBTQA plus issues in the Islamic context? Meron na ba tayo, or what are your insights on this?
Okay. Ako muna, Ryan, ha? Okay. I think magandang tanong. First is, I think, if you're familiar with my second film, Cartas de la Soledad, which was produced by Cinema One, it was basically it was a LGBT film. It was a story about this dato who kind of parang was fixated with a postman. So meron silang attraction. So it was LGBT in a sense. I did it in 2011. Now I'm developing a film. That's also LGBT. It's about a trans woman. So I think mahirap kasi usapin yung are we ready? It's really for us filmmakers just to do it and present it to the world, and hope that the world will be able to discuss or talk about the subject. Sa tingin ko yun naman kasi yung usapin, yun naman talagang isa sa mga role ng mga filmmakers. They make films and they present their films to the world. Not necessarily films that have ready answers, but films that may get answers from people or might spark a conversation. Kasi yun naman talagang importante, that you spark a conversation. Ako as a filmmaker, isa sa marko talaga, even in my crafting or my plots, I never supply answers. I only supply lots of questions. From Limbunan to my latest film, it's all about questions, never answers. So that way, I respect my audience, I respect people to formulate their own opinions based on what they've seen. Um, ayun, kasi for me, ang dami-daming forbidden, quote-unquote, na mga topics na kailangan ng harapin, kailangan ng confront ang Mindanao. And LGBT issues, isa sa mga kailangan ng pag-usapan. And ayun, ako as a gay person, for me important siya. And tuwing titinan ko nga yung mga pelikulang gustong gawin, ang dami ko pang gustong gawing LGBT material. And ayun, I don't think there's a right time for it. Gagawin na natin, yun na lang yun. Di ba? Ryan?
May hindi ka pa nire-release.
Ano yun? Yeah, buti lang sinabi mo. Next year, in 2021, I'm going to release, inshallah, my really open, buti lang tayo, Ryan, sinabi mo, there's a film that I did with Ryan in 2016 na, kumbaga, hinintay namin na mag-ferment, alam mo yung tamang oras sa lumabas. Early today, we were talking about it. So, hiningian ko kasi ng post-production funding sa NCCA. And ang nakarating sa akin, positive yung post-production funding. So, I just hope yung chismis na yun ay totoo. Because that's going to enable the film to be finished. Ayun, so sana nga totoong in-approve ng NCCA board yung funding, post-production funding for the film para sa 2021, lumabas na yung Topografia, which is basically a story of these two college friends, di ba, Ryan? Played by Felix Rocco and Jasmine Mendoza. Isang reluctant politician and then isang journalist. And then the story happens on the eve of the inauguration of the BARM, of the Moro entity. So lahat ng mga skepticism, lahat ng mga issues, even romantic issues and sexual issues lumalabas dun sa pelikula na yun. So I hope it comes out in 2021. Thank you for reminding me, Ryan.
Yeah,
Something to look forward to,
it's
Ryan.
important to talk about LGBTQA plus films especially in the Mindanaoan context, because it's very rich. I'm developing a film now, my first full length, hopefully. It's about it's a story about the transsexual with a Muslim boyfriend and how they deal with it, because sabihin ko ba ta? I'm basta gagawin ko siya. And last year we have a special section in our festival in Mindanao. It's called the Bloom section because we were celebrating LGBT as well as women in that festival. This film called Pamulugo by Candy Darling, she also starred there. I think it's one of the most beautiful Mindanaoan LGBT film I've ever seen, and it won in our festival. It won the Bloom Prize in our festival, because and there are many Mindanaoan LGBT films actually by so many filmmakers already. I agree with Teng. It doesn't need to answer anything or everything. It just need to be there and be present, just like we are present. Because the mere presence of those kinds of LGBT films and our presence, I think is enough to start conversation. I think film is a conversation more than it is an art. It is a conversation that that we need to talk about. That's why in every film festival there is a film talk back, and it should every festival should have a film talk back by the filmmakers, because film is a conversation. We need to talk about it, whatever it is, and in this case, LGBT films, because it varies in experience. My experience as a filmmaker and as a trans woman in Zamboanga is so different from how I experience it in other parts of the Philippines. But my experience, for example, in Zamboanga is it's very rich. Somehow it's sad, but it's also engaging. It's also it gives me a lot of revelations about life as a trans woman, and seeing that in films, and hopefully I'm hoping that a lot of filmmakers, especially gay filmmakers and trans filmmakers, make film about us as well, because I think it's a very important conversation to make, especially in Mindanao.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. And
Can I say something?
yes,
Yeah.
okay, Sir Daddy.
Yes. Yes. Ryan mentioned, I don't know, Pamalugu, no? We programmed that in Cinema Rehiyon this year, no? Early this year. Uh, uh, um, Earlier than that, no? Actually, there was already a film, short film made by a transgender Muslim
Tausug.
woman. No, si
Si
model
Salvatore.
citizen.
Bridget.
Model citizen. Huh?
Bridget Salvatore.
Yes. Bridget Salvatore. No, we program in Cinema Rin in 2013, all the way back.
Los
So it's
Baños.
not a question of yes, Los Baños. It's not a question of are people ready to see Mindanao LGBT films? They have been there. They have been made. No?
Actually,
Maybe they need to be put on the radar more. No, it's film Ryan has made. No, may ilan na, no? And the film made by Zep Suarez, no? The short film. What was the
Adrian
title?
Araujo.
Yeah. See, so meron na, marami na. At it's just a matter of curating them and then putting them in proper perspective. That these are LGBT films, these are trans films, no? And letting the public get access to them.
Also, the film of self about the transgender Bajau is coming into fruition as well. It has been to so many international film festivals, and I think I'm very excited to see that. It's about the trans woman, a Bajau trans woman.
Even in Arnel Mardocchio's paglalakbay ng mga bituin sa gabi.
Yes.
There's a
Lesbian.
lesbian relationship central to the story. So meron na. It's there. It's right out there. You just have to be observant. And the problem is actually also the distribution of films.
Yeah.
That's why people don't know about these titles, no? That they've depicted such.
Okay, thank you, Sir Teddy. Ryan.
Si Candy Darling
Director
pala,
Teng.
kun
Yes.
ko, si Candy Darling, the star and director of Pamalugo, is the lead character in my next film as a trans woman.
Siya nang pinili mo, Teng, hindi ako.
Masyado kang busy.
Okay, so thank you so much. And before your parting messages, there's this one question, pero dapat yung sagot, isang word lang din. How would you describe the future of Mindanao cinema? Let's start with Sir Jojo. One word.
Masaya.
Masaya. Okay, Ryan.
Blooming.
Blooming. Direct Teng.
Challenging.
Challenging. Sir Teddy. Nakamute po kayo.
Sorry. Okay. The future of Mindanao cinema is now. Now is the future. It is happening.
Okay, so thank you so much to our panelists. And before we move on, I would just like to thank Naki and Rods who are doing the technicals for tonight. Let's give them some love. And thank you so much to everyone. And Sir Teddy, you start the ball rolling and your parting messages.
Yeah, I would just like to say, in the years of helping curate and films from Mindanao, for Cinema Rehiyon, I've seen so many films, uh, some good, some bad, some not worth it, a few masterpieces. Uh, it's such a rich and diversified and exciting culture, that you can see in this film. I'm not from Mindanao, I'm from Manila, so it's a way, it's a window into the world of Mindanao, by watching Mindanaoan cinema, and made by Mindanao filmmakers. And this has gone a long way from what used to be, our notion of what Mindanao cinema is, especially in the old days, that like films like Bajau, like that, and they had to be made in Manila and by Tagalog filmmakers, and this kind of films actually were good during their time, but they did not reflect the real Mindanaoan culture. But it is, as I said, it is happening now. The Mindanao filmmakers have their voices now. You have your own festivals, and I think this is great. This is exciting, and then together with the films coming from the other island regions, as well from Metro, as from the NCR, this is now what is going to constitute the real national cinema.
Thank you, Sir Teddy. Direct Tang?
Yes, ako, I've always been here as an enabler and as well as an observer of cinema. So I've seen a lot of developments. I've seen a lot of trajectories in Mindanao cinema, and I've seen how Mindanao filmmakers grew and developed. And I'm so excited to see a lot of uh, filmmakers make their own films. I'm excited to see the next um, Zurich Chan film. I di ba sinabi ko, I've been a fan of his for the longest time. I want to see how he progresses. I also want to see the new Bagani Fiola film that he's working on, that documentary film,
Yeah.
and also the film that he's doing with Hubert Baltz funding. So it's a big thing because I mean, filmmaker gets the Hubert Baltz funding. Yeah. So I'm excited about a lot of things. I'm excited with, for example, the new works of Lyric de la Cruz, who's now in Europe. So he's established himself in the European scene. So it's also something that we look forward to because his works are rooted in a Mindanaoan sensibility. And I also look forward to a film that I did with a lot of Mindanaoan filmmakers, with El Montelmo, with Hasanuddin uh, Hashim of Marawi, with Bagani Fiola. It's an omnibus film funded by Japan Foundation on the COVID and the pandemic, how we see cinema in the pandemic. So we invited 12 filmmakers from all over Asia to do it. So I'm also excited about that and how it goes through. I'm excited about so many things that I just hope that this excitement also voice my own personal ambition. Ayun, I'm uh, ang hirap kasi magsalita ngayon kasi we are in a COVID, pero masarap din kasi yung meron ko optimism. I'm optimistic about how Salamindanao Asian Film Festival can help Mindanao cinema, di ba, transcend itong difficulty and become what it has to be. I'm also excited sa New Duran Cinema sa further discussion niya ng Mindanao cinema and Southeast Asian cinema and Philippine regional cinema. So ako, despite all these dark things na nangyayari sa atin because of pandemic, I would like to see cinema as a beacon of light. 'Di ba? Ay hirap eh. Yun yung parang source, pating source ng naging anxiety natin, filmmakers. I know, alam niyo to na parang ano yung mangyayari sa atin afterwards. We always question ourselves. We always question this cinema, if it's something worth pursuing after the pandemic, kung kailangan may value pa ba, because I know a lot of filmmakers have lost hope and have lost faith, and I want to reach out to all these friends, all these filmmakers, not to lose hope, because maybe cinema can bring us back to the light and bring us back to whatever we enjoy much in life. So I'd rather be more positive and optimistic than be swallowed by this darkness and by this, this chaos and this, problem. So ayun, parang for me, without cinema, maybe ako rin siguro baka nalamon na rin. But again, I want to see cinema as that glimmer of hope for me to hold on and see a bright future perhaps, or maybe kahit man lang makasurvive sana, di ba? So ayun, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation.
Thank you.
Teng,
That's
hindi
nice,
ka
thank you.
excited sa film ko?
Hindi mo pa ako kinakausap about your film. The last time you sent me was like 2 years ago. So ayun, I commented on a sequence treatment. Ang layo-layo ng sequence treatment sa script. So ayun.
Okay. So Ryan, your parting message?
Just like Teng, I'm I know that the pandemic has hit a lot of filmmakers, especially Mindanao hard. Even in Manila, but mostly in Mindanao, because a lot of my filmmaker friends have lost hope. They don't have jobs. Mahirap because to begin with, the filmmaking industry in Mindanao is, is not giving them enough financial stability, especially now that it's COVID. But I'm also hopeful. Like Tang, I'm very much hopeful that we can pass through this. And after this, we will bloom. I have so much hope with Julian, for example, Julian Ilagan, going to I mean, with the Rotterdam lab that she's about to take. I'm very excited with Joe Bacchus's film because I know that it's gonna push through. I'm excited for Zuri Chan. I'm excited for Edmond Delmo. I'm excited for a lot of filmmakers. I'm excited for my friends, Seth Suarez, with his film that has been to so many international film labs. I'm excited for Adrian Araujo making new films. I'm excited for a lot of filmmakers. Not only them, but to the young filmmakers as well who are just starting to make films. I hope that this pandemic will not discourage you. I hope that this pandemic will encourage you more in being more creative and take this pandemic as, so for some of us, as a rest, and for some of us also as a starting point to think about film. Personally, I'm taking a rest with this pandemic, and I think I needed that. For a long time, I've been working with film productions and so on and so forth, but I needed rest from all those to re-energize myself and to see myself as well, to hear myself. Para siyang retreat. But that's honest. That's honest to goodness that I'm taking a break. And when the pandemic or whatever happens, I know that I'm bouncing back. I know that I'm going back because my love for cinema is deep in my heart, and I hope that all of us have that as well. So yun, don't lose hope. I mean, take a rest if you must, but we're bouncing back, friends.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay. Last but not the least, certainly, and Derek Jojo, your final message for tonight.
Mm, I think all in all sa pinag-usapan natin is ang concern ko is more on how to help. So I'm opening myself to those young, newly, bago pa lang talaga. Kahit sino. Sana kung
That's something to look forward to, Derek
wala
Jojo.
Teng, wala. Teng?
Nakamute.
Sir Jojo, financially ba yan?
I guess we all do that.
Ayos.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us, Direct Jojo, Direct Ryan, Direct Teng, Sir Teddy Ko, and to Maki and Rods who are in the technicals. We may be afar, but we are still here. We are gathered, and this has been the Mindanao Forum. Before we go, thank you very much to everyone who watched via Facebook Live, and we invite you to the screenings of Bulawanong Bahandi and Inday, uh, and the Forum on Women in Cinema on December 22. Still 2020, of course. And thank you so much, and good to see you guys again. And Ryan, good to see you for the first time also. And Direk Jojo, Direk Teng, Sir Teddy, daghang salamat sa inyong tanan, mayong gabi o padayon ang Mindanao Cinema.
Thank you, Sean.
Mabuhay.